Hey guys, Seth here to help you level up your fandom. This is Campaign Diary number 2, covering the first real adventure that we played on Monday, and I think it went pretty good despite my complete and utter lack of preparation. Stick around and I'll tell you all about it. Alright guys, welcome back. Yeah, complete and utter lack of preparation. My job has been really crazy this past week. We're getting ready to launch a project, so I didn't have a whole lot of time to prep this adventure. I went in as soon as the first session got finished. We finished making our characters. I immediately had an idea of how I wanted to do things. So I had like a pretty rough outline of the adventure that I wanted to have. I kind of fleshed some of that out throughout the week, and then on Monday I came in to kind of play through this adventure without prepping much of anything at all. So I had a brief overview of the things that I had prepared. I knew that this adventure was going to be more on rails, and because of that I knew that we had to kind of flesh out a little bit more of their backstories to kind of lead these characters into this adventure. So I did that over this past week. Before the adventure, I kind of got with each of the characters, talked a little bit about what would have happened and things that they have done. As I said before, those 3 points: I needed to bring the party physically together in the same space in the world, I needed to get the party to work together, and I needed a reason to keep the party together moving forward. That was my whole goal for this adventure. So this adventure ended up being a lot more on rails than I wanted it to be, which is both good and bad. I think it was good because it kind of eased the players into playing Dungeons and Dragons. They're not used to playing for more than a single session, so they weren't used to the idea that their characters in this plot line could be several sessions in length. So I think having it a little bit more on rails was really nice for them. Took a little bit off their shoulders and let them kind of see how it unfolded and get used to playing Dungeons and Dragons. If you want to start at the beginning, start at the beginning. So I did. I started to individually kind of go between all the players and tell their story. So we were kind of role playing and seeing what they did from the beginning. So I started with Amofrey, which was the wizard who drowned and then was resurrected by the necromancer and bestowed upon magical powers kind of by accident. During that time, she was taken in by this wizard, Bilkrin, and trained just briefly under him in his wandering mountain. Trained under him and just kind of learned some of the basics of magic. So she wasn't just stumbling around with this newfound magical power. She had some kind of brief training with him. He then kicked her out of the mountain abruptly, stopped all training, kicked her out, and by the time she left the doorway, hit the ground or whatever, turned around, the mountain was gone. Or at least she thought it was gone. Anyways, so he more or less just abruptly kicked her out for a reason that he didn't disclose. He left her with a single coin, which is a coin that is of not common currency. The coin is called a Kodia coin, and the Kodia were the currency, similar to dollars or euros. Kodia was the currency of the Kalazanbaran kingdom. So it's extremely old currency that you just don't see anymore. And because of that, she didn't know what it was, really. And anybody that she asked around the town and stuff, nobody really knew what it was. So she just kind of took this mysterious old coin, kept it on her, and moved on. She found transportation with some merchants moving up into Ardinia. She went to Arden, the capital of Ardinia. Landed in that town, went to the tavern, asked for some direction to the local library. The barkeep didn't know what she was talking about. When she said books, and she kind of explained it a little bit, he kind of got it. He's like, oh yeah, we don't really know what. I have no idea. The king probably has some. And she got kind of exasperated, like, oh well, I can't go talk to the king to just read his books. So she kind of moved on. She was on this little mini quest for knowledge because she had this newfound wizard power and she wanted to learn. So she just moved all around Ardinia, kind of hit some towns, and eventually got a tip to head up to Korim, which is the more or less technological capital of the north. She figured that, you know, if the dwarves in Korim can do these fantastical things, they're bound to have some sort of library. So she headed to Korim. I then jumped over to John. John, who we left dying outside, a cave in the woods after he seeked vengeance on his murdered wife and child. He's more or less dead and dying, like hurt really, really bad, on the edge of this forest. So he scrapes and scrambled his way to a road, and kind of laid on the side of the road for a little bit until a passing merchant found him. The merchant happened to be a dwarf, and that dwarf happened to be headed to Korim. So he kind of bribed him to hide out somewhat, in the back of his wagon, kind of covered with a blanket, so that he could go to Korim and find some way to heal himself up. By the time he got to Korim, he was in a bad way, but luckily the merchant, just instead of stopping in the town square or wherever to unload his stuff, continued on to a local little, continued on to kind of a doctor sort of person who knew how to mend some stuff. Nothing spectacular, like not really even a priest or anything like that, just someone who kind of knew how to bandage some stuff up, and that person healed him enough that he could walk around town a little bit and that kind of stuff. Once he got there, got a little bit healed up, we jumped to Alben. Alben is the half-drow. He's wandering around the world looking for defenses for Ulval. He had a letter of writ from the military saying, exactly what he's allowed to do, what he is doing, so it gave him a lot of credentials. It gave him some serious credibility in the things that he would say. So, if you wander into a town and say, hey, can I look at your military stuff, that's really suspicious. So he had a very extensive, letter of writ from Ulval's military leaders, saying that, yeah, this guy may be asking for military stuff. You don't have to let him do these things. It's not any kind of commandment, but, he's probably telling the truth. We, as the Ulval council, we back whatever he is going to say. So it gave him a lot of credibility, and it would let him, see people's military stuff. Sometimes. So he kind of wandered around a little bit and decided that he wanted to spread the ashes of his friend up in Korim, because his friend had always believed that Korim is how dwarves and dwargar and all of the dwarven kind should be living. Korim was the type of lifestyle that a dwarf should have. So he always had this fantasy dream of moving to Korim one day when he was older. So when he died, Alben kind of took that belief on. So he decided to go to Korim so that he could spread his friend's ashes, and kind of lay it to rest and start to move on with his life, kind of close that chapter of his life. So he headed up to Korim as well. Now, the first to arrive was John. John landed in Korim, got healed up just a little bit, just enough that he could kind of wander around and look for a priest or somebody with some more serious healing spells or something like that. Landed in the town square. Just around the corner from the town square is a market. So he kind of walked through the market. Nobody really seemed to be able to help him. He said that he wanted to look for, a merchant that had, bottles of things and kind of a healing kind of merchant, so hopefully he could find someone selling a health potion. So he looked around. He found a stall that had a bunch of incense burning and all these fancy bottles and stuff on the counter. So he's like, yeah, this is perfect. Walks up to the stall, talks a little bit, John actually knows Dwarvish, so it's really convenient. He can just walk right up to this stall and ask the lady if she has any healing potions. She doesn't really understand what he's saying at first, so he says it a little bit differently, a little different word choice, and she kind of looks around and just says, no, I just sell incense. John was like, well, crap. So he kind of stammers back through the market all the way, and when he gets to the other end of the market, he realizes that after the market ends, as you head further down the street, there's nobody there. It's all kind of empty. The market ends, but the street continues, and there's no people, there's no nothing further down the street. Kind of comes to a roundabout thing. There's a tower right in the center of this little courtyard. So he goes, looks at the tower, can kind of tell that it's an important sort of place, so he goes and knocks on the door. Nobody answers. He hits the door with a staff. Nobody answers. He's exhausted. He leans up against the tower door, and it just swings open, and he falls into the main living space of this tower without realizing that the door was open the whole time. He knocked, but he never tried to open the door. So when he leans back, falls into the room, he kind of stammers up really quick, notices there's nobody here, looks around, doesn't really find much of anything on the bottom row, or on the bottom level. So he sees it off in the corner, there's a set of stairs that kind of lead up and around the tower, so he takes those, finds another wooden door all the way to the top, seems to be shut, knocks, nothing, pushes on it, and it too just swings right open. And inside he sees this cacophonous room. The room itself isn't large, but there's a lot going on. There's lots of bubbling bottles and cauldrons in the corner, and stools haphazardly strewn, papers all over the place. There's a very busy feel to the room, even though it's empty. There's nobody here. So he kind of looks around this crazy room looking for something, rolls a perception check to see if he can see any bottles, hits a natural 20, and because of that, he spies a tiny little bottle off in the corner of a desk with a little string and a label coming off of the neck that says, "Don't freaking drink me." And he looks at it, and he does another investigation check to see if there's anything noteworthy about it or anything else on that note. And again, natural 20. So in that investigation check with 2 back-to-back nat 20s, I said, yeah, you don't really see anything else with the bottle, but you kind of, looking at it, you just get this just feeling that this is probably going to heal me. Even though the label says, "Don't drink me," you just feel like it's right. So he took that to mean like, yeah, this is definitely a healing potion. So he drank it. It was just pretty much one drop. As soon as it hit his tongue, all the cuts and bruises and stuff on his feet just flare into pain. Just bright, white hot pain in it. That pain just kind of moves up his body, his legs, his chest, and his head, and it's just this searing pain. But as soon as it hits his head, it's gone, and he feels fine. He kind of checks his arm to see if it is fully mobile again, and seems to be fine. So he kind of assumes that, yeah, that sucked for a second, but I seem to have been healed, and that seems fine. So he kind of just hangs out in the tower while he's resting. He just wants to rest. So just after John arrives, makes his way into the tower, Alben arrives in town, and he is on a pretext of a mission. He wants to talk to military advisors or something like that. So the first thing he does is find the tavern. He goes into the tavern, talks to the barkeep, says, "Hey, do you know any military people or anything like that? I'm trying to find the military of Korim." The barkeep says, "No, not really. They're kind of wandering on the market a little bit, but I haven't seen anybody." So Alben makes his way out of the tavern, heads down to the market, happens to be the same market that John walked through, and is looking around and spies a dwarf who's standing up super straight and has huge kind of flared shoulder pads on, and Alben's like, yeah, that's some weird attire, unlike everybody else around him. I'm gonna see if he's military. So he walks up to him, starts a conversation. He says, "Hello," in common, and the dwarf says, "Hello." in Dwarven, kind of a test. And Alben, being raised by Dwargar, knows Dwarven. And he says back in Dwarven, "Hi, I'm just looking, can you point me to some military people or something like that?" And as soon as he says, that first sentence in Dwarvish, the dwarf that he is talking to just perks up and says, "Oh, a brother!" and grabs him for a hug, because this tall drow all of a sudden comes up and just starts speaking Dwarvish to him. So he just assumes that it's somebody that is familiar with the system here in Korim and just kind of loves on him for whatever reason. So Alben's like, "Oh yeah, okay, this guy is friendly. I'm gonna ask him more direct." He said, "Hey, are you in the military here?" And the guy says, "Yes, I'm in the military. Is there anything that I can do for you?" And Alben says, "Yeah, I'm trying to, talk to militaries so that I can get some information on their defenses so that I can shore up my own country's defenses." And as soon as he mentions that, the dwarf that he was talking to gets really stoic, kind of standoffish, and just says, "Yeah, be on the tower," and turns and leaves. He went from being really happy to see this guy to not wanting to be a part of this conversation anymore. So Alben thought that was very strange, but he said be on the tower, so that's where he headed. When Alben gets to the tower, he kind of looks up and says, "Oh, maybe this is what he meant." So he walks into the tower. There's nobody inside to greet him, so he just kind of shuts the door behind him and kind of looks around a little bit. He sees that there's nobody here. There's, a hearth in the corner. There's some other random stuff, and he hits the stairwell, headed up to see if anybody's in the top of the tower, and is met with a closed wooden door. So he knocks on the door at the top of the stairs, and nothing. So he kind of creaks the door open, and as soon as he creaks that door open, he's grabbed by the cuffs and hurled into the room, face down on the wooden floor, with somebody kneeling on his back. And the person on his back says very exhaustedly, "Who are you?" And Alben just says, "Hey, I'm just looking for some military. One of the guys in the market pointed me here. I don't mean any harm." So the guy kind of believes him, gets off his back, pulls him up. As soon as he gets off his back and stands him up on his feet, John, now that we know it's John kind of gives him an appraising look and sees that he's very scrawny for a drow even. He's a skinny, scrawny dude. I mean, Alben's character, he only has a 2 in strength, so he's a very weak, scrawny kind of guy. But he looks him over and says, "Hey, I feel completely unthreatened by you, so I apologize for doing that. I just wanted to be safe." They kind of have a little conversation, and right in the middle of this conversation, there comes a knock on the door. So right about that time, Amofrey shows up in the town. Amofrey kind of wanders around a little bit. She's just looking for a library, so she hits the tavern, and the barkeep in the tavern instantly falls in love with her. So what I did was I took a D4, because I knew someone would go into this tavern, right? So I took a D4 and rolled it, and that would have determined which of the 3 of them, or nobody with a 4, this barkeep would just adore. So I rolled a 2, and because Amofrey happened to be sitting in the second spot from where I started counting, he would fall in love with Amofrey if she ever went into this tavern. So I rolled that beforehand, and she happened to go into the tavern, so it was great. I got to roleplay this bartender who kind of is just a normal guy. He's human, just a normal bartender doing his thing. But as soon as he sees Amofrey, he just kind of can tell. He's like, "This is it. This is the girl for me." So I got to play this really flamboyant kind of like just smitten bartender, and that was really really fun, and I think that they really enjoyed that. This crazy, hilarious bartender. He didn't have any information for her. He didn't know what a book was. He barely knew how to write the numbers and stuff to keep his business open. He didn't really know where any of the books were. He kind of assumed maybe the tower or somewhere beyond there. There's important people beyond the tower. He just kind of assumed that would be where the books were. So, during this conversation, amofrey ordered a drink. She drank it and left 2 copper pieces on the counter. Kind of left. As soon as she stepped out, she realized that she didn't really remember which direction he said that the important people and maybe the books were. So she turns back in and sticks her head back into the tavern, and she sees him kind of with his back to her, putting something up on a shelf, and she says, "Hey, which direction did you say the thing was?" And she's like, and the bartender pulls this thing down and says, "Hey, I still have your pennies. Do you want them back? I'm saving them." And he kind of puts them back up on his mantle. He's like, he's so in love with her that the 2 coppers that she gave him, he's saving. He's not using for his business. He put it up on the mantle to save. He is so in love with this person. So he tells her which direction to go. She kind of heads off towards the tower, because beyond the tower, he thinks that, yeah, there's important people. They're bound to have something important that you can read. So she makes it to the tower. She opens the tower door and sees nothing, really. Makes her way up the staircase and sees a door at the top of the stairs. She kind of knocks on it. Nobody answers. She says, "Hey, I'm looking for, some books. Is there books in here? Can anybody point me to the library in town or anything like that?" And nobody answers. Inside, John and Alben are both just shh. Don't say anything. John doesn't want any trouble. He doesn't want to talk to anybody. He just wanted to heal up and get out of the tower, because he stole this healing potion. So they're both being very quiet up in the tower, and amofrey, not hearing anything, decides to have a look around. So she opens the door, and as soon as the door starts to open, Alben steps behind it and is just standing behind the door as it swings open in front of him, just being super quiet. Amofrey walks into the room and sees John kind of in the corner. They have a brief conversation. John doesn't really believe that she is this innocent girl looking for books, but right about the time they hit that point, Alben steps out from behind the door and says, "Hey, I'm here. I hid behind the door because I didn't know who you were or what you were doing, so I just wanted to be safe." So he comes out. They have a little conversation. The 3 of them kind of talk it out a little bit, decide to head out and head to the other side of the tower, see what's over there. They head downstairs, and when they get down to the bottom, they notice that John is still upstairs. So amofrey heads back upstairs to see what is holding John up, and as soon as she gets in the room, she sees that John is rummaging through all these drawers, trying to figure out, if there's other supplies that he can take from here, other healing potions or something like that he can take. She looks at him and says, "Hey, are you trying to steal something from here?" And as soon as she asks that, a boulder comes crashing through the window and narrowly misses John and just destroys part of this room and leaves a big old hole in the wall where this boulder came through. So that was weird. They also hear Alben downstairs saying, "Hey, there's some stuff going on. There's somebody outside." So the 2 of them up in the room look down through this hole and see 2 kind of stone men standing in the middle of the street. And one of them has his arm back like this, but it isn't holding anything. So they're just like, why does he have his arm back like this? And he unleashes, and as his arm moves, you see this kind of dust, like his hand kind of is flowing in dust, and he kind of hurls an invisible thing, and that dust consolidates into a boulder as it's flying right in and smashes another hole in the wall right next to them. So that's crazy. So they kind of panic a little bit. Oh my gosh, they head downstairs, peek out the door, and as soon as they open the door, another boulder comes crashing into the door and hits amofrey. Amofrey takes this door explosion right in the chest, flies back a little bit, takes a little bit of damage, but hops right back up on her feet, runs out there, and tries to just get in the fight. She uses Thunder Wave as kind of a surprise attack. I let her get a surprise round on them. Uses Thunder Wave, does some damage to both of them, and then we're in initiative. The battle is somewhat short. They are stone golems, so in Korim, I decided that they make 3 types of golem constructs. They're extremely good at it. They're the best in the world. The first is educational, and that is always very small, kind of animated golems that can teach kids how to read and teach math and science and all kinds of stuff. They're very much a nobleman's training tool for his kids. Since they're so small, however, they're kind of ceramic, sort of. They're extremely fragile, so they're extremely expensive, and not very common in the city. The second type of construct that you'd find commonly is what I called an industrial construct. So what that means is like big stone golems that can build buildings or repave roads or do a lot of the city heavy lifting kind of stuff. Dig out a cave in a mountain or something like that so that people can start mining. These industrial constructs are very much just workhorses. They just build and do that kind of thing. The third kind of construct in Korim is actually a heavily guarded secret, and that's the defense construct. The defense constructs are also made of stone, but right in the center of their bodies they have these big glass spheres. And the spheres, being glass, are like these deep black purple, almost like looking into a galaxy in them. And that, I decided, was what actually controlled the construct. So that was where all of their sentience, all of who they were as golems, was contained in this orb. And then, the metal body, or the metal or stone, whatever the body was made of, was just whatever the body was made of. And the orbs could be transferred between them and could be put into different constructs to do different things, but they all relied on this central orb. So eventually, John gets behind one of the golems and decides to climb up on his back and chop into his neck joint with his axe. He gets right in the joint. He rolls pretty well, not amazing, but pretty well, and the axe goes right into his neck joint and gets stuck in the golem. So he can't pull it out. So he's standing on the back of this golem trying to pull the axe out from its neck. And then the next turn is the golem's turn. So the golem to the side of him turns, raises his fist, because he's going to smash John off the back of this other golem. Right as he's about to go, John makes his dexterity saving throw, lets go of the axe, and falls on his back on the ground. And that golem smashes down on the first golem's head and destroys it, does a ton of damage. And as soon as he connects, the orb in the golem that was hit drops out of his body and rolls kind of down the street. And as soon as the orb is out, the stone just kind of melts into like molten stone and kind of slogs to the ground and pulls around John. John takes a few points of damage as he tries to get out of the way of this now molten stone. Right about the time that happens, the dwarf general that Alben met in the market shows up. He comes rushing down the street, leading a crowd of 50 other dwarves or so. Just this huge regiment of the dwarf military. He comes rushing down the street at John and Amofrey, who at this point are kind of right next to each other, standing in the middle of the street. He comes rushing into them and says, "Hey, what's going on?" Walks up to this golem and grabs the sphere. As soon as he touches the sphere, it just comes loose, and that golem's body melts into slag and kind of melts onto the road, just like the first one did when its sphere was removed. He walks over to Amofrey and John with the sphere and says, "How did you..." He's so upset that he doesn't have words to say. He's so convinced that no one could ever control any of these defense golems that when some a golem is off doing something that the military didn't approve, he instantly suspects anybody around. So he sees these two, talks to them, and they had a couple of chances to convince him that what they were saying was true, and they rolled pretty poorly. So he assumes that they're some kind of terrorists who are here to commandeer these defense golems and destroy the town. Right about that time, the dwarves start searching the tower, head upstairs, and Alben, who's still in the tower, decides that it is way too late to just come out and say, hey, I'm not doing anything illegal here either. He decides that it's way past that point. So he says that he's going to lay down among the rubble in this room and play as if that he was knocked out during the attack. He rolls really well, lays down, covers himself in rubble, all that stuff, and pretends to be passed out as soon as the dwarves walk in. They see this half-elf passed out on the floor and just assume that he was an innocent bystander. They take him downstairs, and he talks to the general, who at this point doesn't really remember his face, just from that chance meeting in the market. So he sees this guy come down the stairs out of the tower, and his dwarf guards tell him that, hey, this guy was unconscious upstairs, seems to be uninvolved, all of this stuff. And the dwarf general says, hey, I'm sorry that these terrorists were trying to kill you. He pretty much assumes that Alben lives in this tower, it's his tower, and these two terrorists were sent to try to kill him. Alben completely plays along. He just says, yeah, that's definitely what happened. And these two are arrested and taken on their way to the military installation to be interrogated. Alben just kind of plays along, lets it happen, and then decides to follow the other two loosely, very far behind them, just so that he knows where the military base is, because he still is operating under this pretext that he's going to talk to the defense people there and get some knowledge on the defenses. So that's his reason for continuing on to the military base. Once there, the two people, John and Amofrey, are put into holding cells alone. They're interrogated briefly, and they roll really well. So the person interrogating them believes what they're saying and leaves. A couple hours go past of them sitting in this cell, and they are moved to a holding cell together, and then shortly thereafter some guards come in along with Alben. Alben is kind of half dragged in, doesn't really know what's going on, into this holding cell. All three of them are shut in with some guards, door shut and locked. Nothing really goes on. They kind of pass the time a little bit. Alben has no idea what's going on. During this, I had Alben make a persuasion roll. He didn't know why, and I didn't tell him, but he rolled really well. So they're in this room alone. Nobody really knows what's going on. About 10 or 12 hours later, the door opens and in walks the general, and he says, hey, I'm sorry that we had to do this, but nobody can make these golems do what we don't want them to do. They're incorruptible. So he had to take precautions. He had to be sure that they weren't the ones involved. So he comes into the room, says, hey, I'm sorry. We realized after a short investigation that you weren't actually involved. You were telling the truth. It's only been a day. You guys are free to go. And as soon as they get out the front door, a little gnome comes rushing out after them and says, hey, wait, and gets up to them and is absolutely exhausted. Like, takes 2 or 3 minutes to just catch his breath so that he can talk. And says, we're terribly sorry. The core military doesn't generally make this kind of mistake, but this is a special circumstance. Here's some things to help ease the trouble that we've caused. And this gnome holds out a sheet of paper with some draconic on it. And Amofrey looks at the sheet and says, oh, hey, that's draconic. I know draconic. So she takes the sheet, this little scrap of paper. The gnome then hands each of the three of them a coin of electrum, which doesn't sound extraordinary, except when you know that in my setting, electrum is extremely rare. That particular type of metal has some extremely special magical properties, and since it's got such particular magical properties, it has been mined for thousands of years. And now, at this point in the history, is all but gone. Completely used up, mined out of the ground. So, this gnome hands them each an electrum coin, which is extremely odd. He just kind of hands it, here you go, great, and starts to walk away. John says, hey, what was on that sheet of paper? And amofrey reads that sheet out loud, and then from the sky, lands right next to her, like Iron Man style, just out of the sky, this weird kind of wooden metal construct thing that nobody in this party has ever seen before. It's not like the defense constructs that they're familiar with. As soon as it lands, they hear the gnome curse and turn around and start running back at them. So he runs all the way back to the party and says, why? Takes that sheet of paper away from her. And he just kind of mumbles under his breath, oh, stupid half-elves, and writes out a new note, hands it back to her and says, here, do not read this out loud, okay? Okay, great. Only use it when you have to. Cool, and then leaves. Now that sheet of paper looks like this. It's just a little sheet with some draconic on it. This one happens to say, please help us. Easy, right? But if somebody says this out loud with this sheet of paper, down comes some help. After all is said and done, some weird stuff was going on. Everybody decides unanimously they need a drink. So they head back into town, back to the market, back to the tavern. And as soon as they walk in, that bartender turns around and the bartender goes, oh my gosh! It's you! And he reaches up and grabs his 2 copper pieces, says, here, I still have them, and puts them down on the bar. Amofrey doesn't really know what to do with this. She's never had anybody act like this around her. It's very strange. So she says, can we get some drinks, please? And the bartender's like, yeah, of course, anything. And he grabs this cask of ale and puts this whole cask on the bar for her. She's like, great. Starts pouring some drinks, and they go and sit down in a booth. Shortly after they sit down, they kind of look over, hear the door open, and then look at the bartender, and the bartender's face just goes blank. Pale, blank, just sheer terror. So, oh, that's weird. Hear the door open, see the bartender's face go blank, and as soon as his face goes blank, the room gets dark. It's as if the sun was suddenly passed over by some clouds. So everything kind of just dims and gets dark. It's midday at this point, so there's not any lights in the tavern or anything to go out. It just gets dark. And that's where we left it. Little do they know that this is what I deem kind of the first tier bad guy. I have definitely adopted Matt Colville's approach of a campaign being 3 chapters. I love that. So we're in the first chapter right now. And the guy that just opened up the door to this bar is the bad guy for the first chapter. His name is Gorpus the Constructed. And he looks like this. Yeah, super cool. So, the players don't know who Gorpus is just yet. And neither will you. If you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, well, there's that other one. Hit subscribe if you want to see more of these campaign diaries. Check out Matt Colville's channel. Links are in the doobly-doo. So until next week, guys, we play on Monday. Hopefully this video goes up on Wednesday next week. This week has been a little crazy. And hopefully they won't be quite so long. I'm getting better at this, editing and all that stuff. So hopefully they'll be a lot better moving forward. But until next time, guys, I hope that all of your rolls are 20s.